Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to InfoGamer. For this video, we're going to keep building our Mario Run game. Now in the last video, we showed you how to fix an error that we found with our wall jump function. We were able to make the wall jump a lot smoother and more user-friendly. And so that was something really cool that we were able to do. In the video before that, we showed you how to import a 3D model for your main character, and that model had animations attached to it. Now, unfortunately, the model that we've created, our little Giuseppe chef guy, he is not available for the public at the moment. We might be able to create another version of him that will be available, but this model that we've created, we intend to use in upcoming games and projects that we want to work on. So unfortunately, we don't have it available, but there should be other assets that you can find online with animations attached to them. Maybe not the same type of animations, and maybe not all the animations that we're going to be using, but you should be able to find some awesome, good character models on the Unity Asset Store that have animations, and you can just use those for now. We'll actually put a link in the description of a few models that we recommend. Now for this video, what we want to do is add a few more animations to our main character and have our code control the transition between our idle, our walk, and we're going to be adding a few jump animations, fall animations, and a wall grab animation. It's going to be really fun and really cool. So let's get started. Alright, so here we have our project open in Unity, and I'm going to go ahead and hit play so that you guys can see the progress that we're making on our game. And that way you can also compare what we've made with what you're creating and see if it matches up. So let's go ahead and hit play. So here you can see we have our main character, and he falls, and when he touches the ground he starts his walk animation. When he hits this wall and is no longer to walk forward, he starts an idle animation. And then when I click the screen, we can do our wall jumps, and you can see that the wall jumps are a whole lot smoother than what they were. We also have coin pickups and our score incrementing. Now if there's anything that doesn't match up or isn't working properly with your project, you can go back and watch the particular video that you might have skipped over or missed something on. Or if this is the first video that you're watching, you can go ahead and click on the card in the top right corner of your screen, and that will take you to the beginning of this playlist. Now in order to add the jump, the fall, and the wall grab animations to our main character and have code transition between these animations, we need to open up our animator window, which I have opened right here. But if you don't currently have a tab open for your animator window, you can open it by going to Window, and then in this drop down menu find Animator, and that will bring up this animator window, and you can attach it to anywhere on your workstation by dragging the tab around, and I like to have it just right here for now. Now inside this animator window you can see that we already have a few transitions between our idle animation and our walk animation, which we did 2 videos ago. And for this video we're going to be attaching our jump animations and our fall animations, and then we also have let's see, where is it? Oh yeah, right here we have our wall pose or our wall grab animation. Now the first thing that we need to do is add a few more parameters to our animator controller, and we can do that by clicking on this plus sign. So I'm going to add one more float parameter, and I'm going to call this Y speed. So right now we have an X speed, which controls the transitions between our idle and our walk animation. We're going to add a Y speed so that we can help our code control the transitions between our idle and walk animations to our fall and jump animations. So we have our float Y speed parameter. Then we're going to add a Boolean value, and this one is going to be is grounded. And this is going to specify, whether or not our main character's controller component is touching the ground or not. And then we're going to add another Boolean parameter, and this is going to be walled, or is walled is maybe a better name, is walled. So just like we have is grounded, I'm going to have an is walled parameter, and this is going to be to specify whether or not our main character is colliding with a vertical wall. Alright, so now that we have all these parameters, let's create a few transitions to our jump animations. Now we have two jump animations. One is for jumping from an idle position or an idle state, and the other one is jumping from a walking state. Now I can go ahead and select our main character here in our project window, and you can see we have a list of all our animations. Now I'll play through both our jump 1 and our jump 2. So our jump 1, it's actually really hard to see because it moves so fast. Maybe I could slow it down. There we go. So you can see that our jump 1, our main character uses both feet to jump off the ground. And so that's why I want this to be the animation from an idle state. So we're transitioning from our idle state to our jump 1. So I'm going to right click on our idle state and then say make transition, and then left click on jump 1, and I'm going to drag it up over here. Then our jump 2 animation, I'm going to select that, and you can see that the jump 2 animation, he jumps and then puts one leg up, which is kind of what you do when you're jumping from a walking or running state. You will jump off one foot kind of thing. And so this is going to be the jump animation that we transition to from our walking state. So I'm going to right click on our walk state or our walk animation, say make transition, and then left click on jump 2. Now I guess while I'm working in the animator window, I'm actually going to expand it. I'm going to make it full screen if I can, right here and there. Okay, that's a lot easier to see what's going on. So now we have our transitions from our idle state to jump 1 and from walk to jump 2. Now let's specify the parameters that we're going to be using, and I need to make sure that I can see my inspector window. So here we have our inspector, and when I select the transition from idle to jump 1, this little arrow, once it's highlighted in blue, that means it's selected, and your inspector should change to all the information we need to know about that transition. So I'm going to make sure that I uncheck has exit time, because what that does is if it has exit time, it won't leave the current animation that's playing until that animation has finished playing. And once it has finished playing, if the parameters or conditions, or if it just has a free transition to another animation, that's when it will transition. Whereas if we uncheck the has exit time, that means in the middle of idle animation somewhere, whenever, we can actually transition out of idle to a jump animation, which is what we want. Now, once we've unchecked has exit time, that means that without a condition or a parameter, we won't be able to leave the idle state. So in order to do that, if we want to leave the idle state and go to the jump animation, we need to set a condition. So I'm going to click this plus sign, and then we want to change the condition from X speed to Y speed, and then we want to set it greater than 0.2. So what this condition is doing is it's kind of like an if statement that's saying if our Y speed condition or our parameter is greater than 0.2, then we're going to leave our idle state and transition into our jump 1 state. So now that we have the transition from idle to jump 1 finished, let's do the exact same thing for our walk to jump 2 animation. So I'm going to select that transition. Then I'm going to make sure that has exit time is unchecked so that we can leave the walk time whenever the condition is set to true. Then what I'm going to do is add the condition, or add a new condition, then select Y speed, and then make sure that it says greater than 0.2. And the reason why we're using 0.2 is so that there is a buffer zone where if we're between 0.2 and negative 0.2, that we can go back to our idle state or our walk state. Because when you're using a float parameter, there's no equals to option in this drop-down menu. There's only greater than and less than. And so in order to have it equal to 0, then you need to set two conditions, which we're going to do. One that will be greater than negative 0.2 and one that will be less than 0.2. Alright, so now that we've created these transitions, which leave the idle and walk animations and go to our jump animations, we need to create another transition that goes back from our jump 1 and 2 back to our idle and walk animations. And so to do this, we're going to actually use this teal colored any state box, which what this does is it means that if you create a transition from the any state to another state, then we can leave any of these other animations and go to that particular state. So I'm going to create a transition going from our any state to our idle state and from our any state to our walk state. And then what we need to do is set the conditions for both these transitions. So let's go ahead and set the conditions for our any state to idle state transition. And we need 5 conditions in order to have this transition work. So I'm going to click this plus sign 5 times. And so for this first condition, we're going to have x speed be greater than negative 0.2, and then we're going to have x speed be less than 0.2. This will give us a 0 x speed, essentially. There will be a little bit of a buffer zone, but if our character is basically not moving, then we'll have him transition away from any state, whether it's jump or fall, back to our idle state. Then for our next 2 conditions, we're going to set those to y speed, and then we're going to do virtually the same thing. If it's greater than negative 0.2 and it's less than 0.2, then we do that. And for this last condition, what we need to set it to is grounded, and we want to make sure that it's set to true. And then for the transition from any state to our walk state, we need to make sure that we select that transition, and then we're going to be adding only 4 conditions for this one. So I'm going to click the plus sign 4 times. The first one is going to be x speed, and we want to make sure that it's greater than 0.2 because we're essentially going back to walking, which means that our x velocity is going to be greater than 0.2. Then for the next 2 conditions, we're going to change those to y speed because we are going to be on the ground if we're playing our walk animation, which means that our y velocity is going to be 0. So we need to say for the first y speed condition, we need to say that it's greater than negative 0.2, and then our second one we're going to say less than 0.2. And for the last condition, let's set that to is grounded and make sure that it's set to true. So let's go ahead and take a break from our animator window and go over to our player controller script, where we will now add code to make these transitions work. Alright, once you have your script open in Visual Studios, there's no variables that we need to add because we're only going to be using our animator variable, and we're going to be using the set float and set bool functions of that class. So for the first line of code that we're going to be adding it to our speed apply function. And inside our speed apply function, you can see this line of code here, which is where we're applying the current velocity in the x direction of our main character to the x speed parameter of our animator controller, which is helping our idle state and our walk state transition. Now, what we need to do is after this last line of code in our speed apply function, where we are applying our y speed value to our character controller, what we need to do is now apply that velocity, the y velocity of our character controller, to the y speed parameter. So I'm going to call our myAnimator component, and then I'm going to set the float, and I'm going to pass in the parameter name, which is y speed, and you need to make sure that you spell it exactly the same way with the same capital letters. And then for the second parameter, we're going to pass in the value, which is myController.velocity.y. So for the next line of code, what we're going to do is add it to our update function, and this is going to be where we're setting the isGrounded parameter of our animator to true or false. And so to do this, I'm going to say our myAnimator variable, and then I'm going to say set bool, nope, not set bone, set bool, the second one. Then I'm going to pass in the parameter name, which is grounded with a capital I and a capital G, ed. And then for the second parameter of this function that we're passing in is going to be whether or not our character controller is grounded. So I'm going to call my character or my controller and then say is grounded. So if is grounded is true, then this parameter will be set to true. If it's false, it'll be set to false. All right, once you have that line of code, let's go ahead and save this, and then we can go back to our project in Unity. So once you're back in Unity, there's one last thing that we need to do before we can test these jump animations. And that is we need to make sure that from the any state, we can't transition back to any state. So I'm going to make sure that we select our first transition from any state to idle, and then I'm going to expand the settings option, and then down below you can see this can transition to self, and we need to make sure that we uncheck that box, because if we don't uncheck that box, our player will do this little judder thing and it won't look very good. So now let's do the same to the other transition from any state to walk. We're going to uncheck that box. Now when I go ahead and hit play, you can see that we have our main character. When he touches the ground, he starts his walk animation, and as I click, he does a jump animation. He plays right into his jump animation, but right now he doesn't leave that animation until he touches the ground again. And to show you that there's two different animations, we can hit play, and then I'll do one jump where I'm walking, where he lifts his leg, and then one jump where I'm standing idle. And you can see that his legs are slightly different. Alright, so now that we have our jump animations done, let's work on our fall animations. So I'm going to click on our jump animations and kind of move them out of the way so that we can put our fall animations in a better position. So here I have our fall animations, and what we're going to do is create a transition from jump 1 to fall 1, and from idle to fall 1, and then we're going to create transitions from walk to fall 2, and from jump 2 to fall 2. So let's right click on each of these, say make transition, and then left click on the animation that we want to transition to. Alright, so there I have the transitions that we need. Now what we're going to do is we're going to select each of these transitions that we just created, and then make sure that we uncheck has exit time. And then for the condition, what we're going to set it to is we're going to pick the Y speed condition, and we're going to say that it's less than -0.2. And I'm going to do that for all these other transitions. Alright, now the reason we need two transitions, one from jump 1 to fall 1, and then from idle to fall 1, and then the same for the fall 2 animation, is because if we're jumping in the air, then as we're coming down, we want to transition from a jump animation to a fall animation. And then the same thing goes for the idle to fall 1 and for the walk to fall 2, is if we're on the ground and then we end up walking off a cliff or the ground falls out from underneath us, we need to transition from being on the ground to falling. And so that's why we need both these transitions. So now that we have the fall animations, let's go back to our game. I'm going to hit play, and we can see whether or not the fall animations work. So right there you can see he had a fall animation, and as I jump and jump and then he starts falling, he plays a fall animation. And there was a little glitch right there, and the reason why is because I don't have the frame set properly for our fall 2. Yeah, our fall 2 plays both our fall 1 and fall 2. So I'm going to reduce the frames on that to right here. So now when I hit play, you can see that we won't have that little glitch. I don't know if you saw it, but when I jump and jump and he starts falling, he just goes straight into his fall animation. Now the last thing that we need to do is add the wall grab animation. So I'm going to reopen our animator window. I'm going to expand it. So for the wall grab animation, I'm going to grab our wall pose state and I'm going to drag it over here. Then we need to create a transition from any state to our wall pose, so that if we're falling and we touch a wall, then we go into wall grab state, or if we're jumping and we grab a wall, or and then we're going to actually set conditions so that we don't transition from a walk and an idle to the wall grab, because if we're on the ground, then we don't need to be grabbing the wall. So once we have that transition made, we're going to create 2 more transitions. I'm going to right click on our wall pose and go from our wall pose to our fall to animation, and then from our wall pose to our jump to animation. This makes it so that if we're on the wall and then we fall off the wall, we go into a fall animation. And if we're on the wall and we jump or do a wall jump, we do a jump animation. So now that we have all these transitions set, we need to create the conditions. So I'm going to select the any state condition, and has exit time is already unchecked. And now I'm going to add 2 conditions for this one. The first condition is going to be our isWalled Boolean parameter, and we're going to make sure that it's set to true, because if we are touching the wall, then we want to be doing a wall grab. Then our other condition is going to be isGrounded, and we want to make sure that this is set to false, because if we're not grounded, that means we're in the air, which means that we want to do a wall grab. But if we are grounded, meaning that isGrounded is true, then we don't want to do a wall grab. This will make it so that we don't transition from our idle state and our walk state to our wall pose, even though we have a transition from any state to wall pose. Next, we want to do the transition from wall pose to fall to, and we want to make sure that has exit time is unchecked, and then the condition is going to be y speed, and we're going to say that it's less than -0.2. And we're going to do the same thing for our wall pose to jump to. We're going to uncheck has exit time. And then we're going to add a condition for y speed, and we're going to make sure that it's greater than positive 0.2. Alright, so that's all the transitions that we need to create in order to have our character transition from a walk to a jump to a fall and so on. But now we need to add a little bit more code to our player controller script in order to handle our our wall pose or a wall grab animation. Now there's 2 lines of code that we need to add to our player controller script, and both of those are going to be in our wall jump function. So I'm going to scroll down to our wall jump function, which is right here. And then inside this first if statement, this is where we're checking to see if our player is not grounded, or in other words, he's in the air. And then we're checking to see if we're colliding with a vertical wall. And so if we are colliding with a vertical wall and our player is in the air, we would then want to transition from any state to our wall grab animation. And so to do this, all we have to say is my animator and then set bool, and we want to call our isWalled parameter, and we want to then pass in the value of true. So I'm going to type true. Once you have this line of code, the next thing that we need to do is go inside this next if statement, where we're checking to see if the player gives the input of fire 1 and then has jumped is set to false, which this if statement is what causes the wall jump. And so what we would need to do inside this is call our myAnimator.setBool, and then call our isWalled variable. I'm going to spell it exactly the same way, and then the value that we're going to pass in is false. So that's everything that we should need to add to our code. Let's go ahead and save this and go back to Unity. Now there's one other thing that we need to do that I forgot to add to the transitions from our wall pose to our fall to and our wall pose to our jump to. So I'm going to select those transitions. Now all we need to do is add another condition where we are checking to see if our isWalled is set to false. This will make it so that we don't loop back into ourselves. So I'm going to do the same thing for our jump to. I'm going to make sure that isWalled is set to false. And then the other thing that we need to do is on our any state to wall pose transition, we want to make sure that in the settings we have can transition to self unchecked. So that should be everything. Now let's go ahead and hit play and we'll see how it works. So we have our player, he has his fall animation, his walk animation, jump, wall grab right there. You can see his wall grab and jump, more walk. And then if he also walks off the cliff, he goes into a fall animation. Pretty awesome. I'm going to play through it one more time with maximize on play set so that you can see our game coming to life. So we have our fall, our walk, our idle, our jump, our wall grab, jump, wall grab, fall. Pretty awesome. It's coming together, you know? And this is my favorite part of game design, is once you start adding the animations to your characters and to your enemies, your game really starts coming to life. So that's everything that we had planned for this video. We hope you were able to follow along, and if your game is working just as well as ours is, make sure that you give yourself a pat on the back because you're doing awesome. Just keep working at it, keep watching our videos, and pretty soon you'll be an expert and you won't even need a tutorial to make games. Now, if there was anything that was hard to understand, or if your game's not working quite as well as ours is, make sure that you leave your questions in the comments below, or even go back and rewatch this video. Once again, thank you so much for watching this video and staying to the end. Make sure that you leave a like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.